Welcome to the Sports Science Dudes. I'm your host, Dr. Jose Antonio. Co-hosting with me today is Dr. Tony Ricci. You can find us on Spotify, YouTube, and Apple Podcasts. Today, our special guest is Eric Hillman. Here's a few highlights about Eric. Eric Hillman is the co-founder of Europa Sports, headquarters in Charlotte, North Carolina, and is the world's industry-leading distributor of nutritional and sports supplements, sports drinks, and accessories with more than 6,000 products, representing 300 plus of the industry's best brands. Eric was also the CEO of MusclePharm Inc., founded in 2005. From September of 22 to March of 24, Eric partnered in his first fitness center in 1985. Man, we're going way back here.
Oh, we're old.
We can relate, Eric. And this was 1985 in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. And he later opened a Powerhouse Gym in Winston-Salem and is the current owner of Linny Powerhouse Gym in Charlotte, North Carolina. Eric serves as a National Physique Committee and IFBB professional judge. He was also director of USA Rugby Trust, the philanthropic arm of USA Rugby. And we're going to talk about this. He was also the strength and conditioning department, head strength coach at Appalachian State University in Boone, North Carolina, from 2015 to 2019. So, want to welcome Eric Hillman to the show. How you doing?
Doctor, great. I appreciate you having me. Like I told you on the text, I'm probably your least educated guest you've had on this show. So, I mean, I'm honored to follow the people who have been on here. And, you know, you and I have been friends for so long. We did the Europa universities together, which were just, I mean, I've had more people comment about the Europa universities and wish they would come back, especially now that supplement world is changing a little bit. But just to jump to football, I was in the strength and conditioning, but oddly enough, my title, App had the best head strength coach ever, best one I've ever known. My term was I was the head size coach, and my job was to keep size and strength and weight on the O&D linebackers and linemen. And from the years I was there, we figured it out. So I just wanted to correct that. I wasn't the head strength coach. That was a gentleman called Mike Serignano, who hands down best strength coach I've ever met in my entire life. And I know almost all of them. But it was fun. And then when the head coach went to Louisville, I was invited to Louisville for the 2019 season. 20 COVID hits, and that destroyed. That was the end of that career. I didn't get to implement at Louisville, and I know we'll talk about football a little bit later, but I didn't get to implement at Louisville what I was able to implement at App, even though the 19th season was a great season. So, yeah, it's been almost 40. It's been 42 years in the lifting supplement industry. I started working out when I was 12 years old. Kid across the street from me beat me up every day, so I had to start lifting weights with my brother's Sears concrete weight. So yeah, it's been a long time in the fitness industry.
Yeah, I mean, between the three of us, we've experienced really dramatic changes in the bodybuilding, the fitness, and the supplement industry. I mean, if you go back really to the 80s and 80s, let's go back to the 80s. I recall buying Weider supplements, Weider protein powder. I had an uncle who was a bodybuilder, and he told me, hey, if it tastes like crap, it means it works. I'm thinking, well, it does taste like crap. We do know that.
People used to say, I used to tell people, it tastes like shit, works like hell. So I will tell you, as long as we've been in it, I spoke at Glanbia's North America sales meeting maybe 2 years before COVID. And one of the questions was, man, how many supplement companies have you seen come and go? And I sat there for a minute and I went, all of them.
Wow.
I mean, all of them. I got in the supplement world around when I graduated high school. And back then it was liver tablets, amino acids. But there was only really 6 brands in the early 80s. One was Weider. And in my gym in 1984 is when I started selling Nature's Best and Beverly International. And so that was 3 brands.
Wow, wait, is Beverly still around?
Yeah, Beverly's still around. Beverly's still around.
Wow,
And yep. And And then there was another brand, and I wish I could remember the cat's name. I don't think Perillo had started yet. Not in 81. But there was only like 6 brands
Right.
in the industry. And then, and it really jumped, it really just catapulted through the 80s, but just surged in the 90s after the Anabolic Steroid Act. Once the Anabolic Steroid Act came in, because you got to remember in the 80s, drugs really weren't illegal. What you would get arrested for if you sold drugs was prescribing without a license, or if you were like 90% of the drugs in the marketplace, selling fake drugs, and it was counterfeiting. That's what they got you for. Really wasn't a big deal for anabolics up until the Anabolic Steroid Act. When the Anabolic Steroid Act came along, is when and look, I'm going to pat myself on the back because there weren't a lot of supplement companies, and I first started when I graduated college. And I started selling products in the gym. It really morphed into, because I couldn't sell drugs openly. But, I mean, you couldn't do it, you couldn't put them on the counter. But what I did is when I picked up Beverly and Nature's Best, I bought fat burners and amino acids. And at that time, when you joined a gym, you just got a bunch of paperwork and you walked out of the gym. Well, my theory was, look, I will give a bottle of fat burners to a female, because that was their primary goal in working out back then, and amino acids because that was really the strongest thing we had, to a male. And 3 months into their membership, they didn't attribute the working out or what I told them to do. They attributed the weight loss to the fat burner and the aminos to the size gain, and that started them always returning. And when I started working at my first vitamin company, it was called Vitamin Locker. You got to remember, the internet hadn't come around yet.
Yeah.
So there was no, GNC was the only retailer. There was no Smoothie Kings. There was no bodybuilding.com.
Was there a vitamin shop at the time?
No, there was not Vitamin Shop. It was really only GNC. I don't even think Vitamin World was around then. But what we did is I started, because I owned a gym, and I was an NPC judge, and I would go around and judge these bodybuilding shows. And at the time, most of the guys who owned gyms were bodybuilders. Wasn't the big communities like Life Fitness or Lifetime or any of that. It was Iron Den Gym. It was Powerhouse Gym. It was World Gym. And most of the owners were bodybuilders. And when I would talk to them at the show, judging them, I didn't know if they bought from me because they liked me or they bought from me because they thought I would judge them better. I didn't care. But what we sold them was the idea of it's incremental revenue. In the summertime, when your memberships drop off, they're still going to take their supplements. They're still going to buy their fat burners. So we did a great job at the Vitamin Locker of getting to the gyms and getting gym owners into selling supplements. And that was a whole East Coast thing. If you visited any gym on the East Coast, they all sold supplements.
Yeah. Yeah. Everyone, I was, Eric, at that time on Long Island, and Steve Mihalik had Mr. Americas, if you remember Steve. And,
yeah.
Yeah. And of course, Bev's came around shortly after that, but everybody was stacked. Twin Lab had just come out too, and they were a big company, and that was, because they were on the island, everybody would stack up on their supplements as well. But the revenue that we generated from that was quite a bit.
Oh yeah, and you have to understand, as my first year in business, as the Vitamin Locker, we did $1 million, and we thought that was like life-changing. That was life-altering money. I think I was able to put 30 grand in my pocket that year. It was just life-changing money. I bought a new car. I didn't have to entertain the idea of drugs anymore because they were slowly becoming really illegal. But it was just a changing market. And then as more supplement companies, and the internet still wasn't there.
Yeah.
I mean, we're still talking 80s. The internet still wasn't there. But as Beverly grew, as the gym market grew, more guys started getting into, you had Genesis Nutrition, you had more brands starting out. You had Mike Zampano on the West Coast starting Champion Nutrition. You had, there were so many new guys evolving in because it was because supplements were starting to grow in the gyms. And it's really where I first started to learn and understand how protein worked in the bodybuilding world. Even though we didn't have protein, you got to remember, all during the 80s, we had egg protein. We had egg protein and amino acids. That was it. And then we finally, Scott Chinnery, who owns Cybergenics, called me one day and said, Eric, I tested the egg protein you guys are selling. It's 80% maltodextrin.
Oh,
and I'm like, but it tasted, oh my God. I mean, it was phenomenal tasting. So I called the owners and I said, guys, and it said 100% egg. And I called the owners and I say, guys, look, it's 80% maltodextrin. And they go, no. The egg that's in there is 100%. And I'm like, holy shit, I've been promoting egg protein, I mean, then it was like we had to convert over to branch chains, because branch chains in capsule form was the next new bomb. You had amino acids still all through the 90s, and we were taking 15 at a time. I can remember trying to see how many I could take at one time and get them down and then go and watch all the white powder come out, right? Because I knew if I tried to take the 2,200 milligram tablets, they weren't breaking down in my system. But that's when I was consuming 48 eggs in a day. But I understood, once I started to watch how the egg protein worked in an athlete, and then I'm looking at, okay, well, the protein powder with the drugs are really helping you speed up recovery. And then the concept of in bodybuilding was morphing from one body part a day, one body part a week. And they were talking about letting the muscle recuperate for 7 days, beat it to death, and then let it recuperate. Right. And then I'm sitting here going, okay, well, why are more bodybuilders getting hurt? Right? Why are they not getting hurt by training extremely heavy? And I'm going, it's the protein. It's got to be the protein. And again, as eating 48 eggs a day and consuming 20% of the eggs in my egg protein and taking 100 capsule amino acids a day, I was consuming so much protein. But at 290, I never got hurt. I was never injured, and I was lifting some stupid weight, and I never got hurt. And then I'm thinking, okay, it's got to be related to the protein, and that's where my whole concept of the protein and trying to get more involved in supplements. And I don't even know where the hell we were going with the conversation, but I know we're off track.
What's good about this is one, the amount of protein you're consuming or we're consuming is something that most people can't do, because you talk to, you worked with football players, you talk to athletes nowadays and you listen to their diet, and I'm always shocked how little protein they eat and really how poorly they eat, especially college kids. But I remember going back to the 90s. You didn't mention EAS. They were another company that was up and coming in. And of course, Bill Phillips's famous quote was, if you take HMB, it's like DECA. And of course, that ruined HMB forever, because everyone's like, this definitely ain't like DECA. But as someone who worked in media at the time, one of the things, and I want your perspective, because you came at it from a business standpoint, I was starting to come at it from a science standpoint, was the initial studies published on creatine in the early 90s. And then gradually scientists started doing studies on creatine. And then eventually other scientists started looking at protein, and mechanistically people are like, well, how does it actually work? They found that it activates something called mTOR. And so now mechanistically people are like, oh, so that's how this stuff works. How did that impact people in the industry? Did they look at it as like, wow, we have more ammunition, or it's just a bunch of eggheads talking about nutrition?
No, and I think if you take a look at guys who were talking about it, right, it wasn't really just science guys. And then you get Jack Owak, who starts talking about mTOR, right? And one of the things that, look, Jack was my very first customer ever.
Oh, really?
Ever. I came down to, because when I was with the NPC, John, I can't remember his name now. John Meese. He was the chairman of Florida, and John was really instrumental in helping me get my national judges card. But John would have me come down and judge the Florida every year. So the Saturday before I started in the supplement world with the Vitamin Locker, I go down and I judge the Florida. There's a guy out there with a booth, and he's selling his Vita House little store. And I go in and talk to him and said, "Hey man, I'm going to work for this vitamin company on Monday." He said, "Call me." I called him Monday. The very first order I ever sold in this industry was the Jack Owak. And he and I have been friends. He and I have been friends for ever since then. I get bashed because I'm friends with Jack, but Jack, believe it or not, taught me a lot about creatine and about the way creatine works. And, his mind works in a really different way than mine and yours, a lot different than yours, right? But sometimes it kind of relates to me. But all of that started to increase I'm going to say the security of taking supplements.
Mm-hmm.
And the creatine gets bashed in the middle 90s, right? It just takes a downfall because they link creatine with ephedrine and people dying that are wearing sweatsuits in 110-degree weather. And then mommies are thought that, hey, creatine's going to kill my child. And since mommies do 90% of the buying in the household, crushed it.
Wait, you know what? I'm glad you brought that up. Refresh the audience, because a lot of the people who listen are young and they're not familiar with that story about creatine and death. Tell people what it was like then.
So creatine, and I have to laugh because look, in the business world, I had the best business partner and best friendship anybody could ever have. His name was Jeff Compton, and Jeff is so bright, and he's really what made the cogs turn on Europa. But I can remember Jeff coming into my office one day, and he's showing me a bottle of California Body Club creatine, and he goes, "Man, do you think creatine will ever sell?" And I'm like, "Man, I'm like, well, this is also the same guy that said nobody in our industry will ever use the internet." Right. And I'm like, "Oh no, I've been in chat rooms since 1985 on Yahoo. Yeah, they'll use the internet." But what happened with creatine? Creatine was getting this upsurge. All these athletes were taking creatine because the changes in their body just by filling the muscle with water was just incredible. But they were also trying to diet down. And they were wearing those, they probably don't even sell them anymore, but they're like these vinyl sweatsuits that their pants and their tops and a straight ephedrine was legal. So they're taking ephedrine, taking creatine, wearing these sweatsuits and training outside in 105-degree weather, and they drop dead. And what they all had in common was ephedrine and creatine. So just like when
and severe dehydration.
But in the supplement industry,
right.
It's like when all those people died from tryptophan that was made out of one bad batch, eliminated tryptophan out of the marketplace. And I'm like, but that's our wonderful FDA, right? And we're hoping all that gets changed. But it was that single event that just chopped the legs out of creatine of this. I mean, creatine was like this. It wasn't like this. That growth of creatine, and because moms still purchased 90% of all the products in a household, mommy said no. And even though now we're coming back, I'm loving all this. I'm a creatine fanatic, especially now that I'm entering sarcopenia. Oh, hell, not entering. I've been in sarcopenia now for quite a few years. And it's odd that everything I did in the 80s and 90s to try to put muscle on, I'm trying to go back and figure out what I did because I'm back there. But now I'm not battling not working out. I'm battling sarcopenia. And, that's a hard joke God plays on us older guys. And so, but but now my creatine levels have increased. My protein levels have increased probably more than they did when I was 25 years old.
Yeah, I tell you, it's weird being the same age as old people. That's what I tell myself.
Yeah.
But no, this is interesting because I always love the history of how the supplement industry has evolved. And if you go from, let's say, the 1990s, well, this was one, I was a personal trainer in Dallas when Metrics came out with their white box powder. I don't know if there were others at the time, but I remember, wow, this is the first protein powder that tastes pretty good. Now, protein powders now, they all taste great. But when that white box, the Metrics white box first initially came out, everyone's like, wow, I guess it doesn't have to taste bad. Now, I heard rumors that there was other stuff in the powder, and that's why people got these tremendous results. But if we go from the 1990s to now, what do you view as, one of the biggest changes or, the evolution of the supplement industry?
So let's go back to the box. I'm going to date how much older than you I am. I tested Base and Plus. Base and Plus was when Metrics came out in a base, which was the carb powder, and Plus was the protein. One had a red cap, one had a black cap. And it really was the first designer meal protein powder, because you could do just as much carbs or as much protein as you wanted. And then Scott Connolly put it in the packets. And once he put it in the packets, it just crushed it. But the first evolution of it was, I really wish they'd go back to that, was Base and Plus. But the reason why you got full, and you got to remember, that was right after Dan Duchesne introduced whey protein. Whey protein wasn't introduced till 92, 93. So we didn't even have whey protein. And then you get Base and Plus, but you could actually put as much that you wanted in there. But what we were finding is that when you drank a egg protein shake, it was so thin, so light. When you drank it, it felt like you had nothing. Scott put so much guar gum in the powder that guar gum filled you up. And it gave you a feeling like, holy crap, I'm full, right? I'm actually drinking a shake, and they're calling it and it was the very first, what they termed MRE, meal ready, and it was like, man, this is really, because I'm full. And it would be like me eating a steak or chicken breast, and I was getting more protein in. But what we were doing is we were doubling up on the protein, because it was the protein that was flavored, and the carbs had guar gum in it and had good extra fats in it. That's why it tasted so good. And the chocolate, and the other thing is, it really was one of the first times, and you got to remember, in the drinking world, and I'm going to say, and anytime you drink anything, the stronger the aroma, the better the taste. So 80% of taste is smell. So when you put that packet into a shaker cup and you took the top off and you went to drink it, because you're doing this and you're not putting your mouth over the whole lid, that aroma is hitting your nose. And it's not that it tasted great, it's that you could smell it now. And when that aroma, if they put a heavy enough chocolate in, that aroma hits your nose, it just tastes better, because you could now smell it. And because they were using good fats and guar gum, it was just a thicker aroma.
Yeah, it definitely was. It was a great improvement over some of the current protein powders at the time. And now you fast forward to today, I don't think I've tried a protein powder that doesn't even taste good. I mean, they all taste good. Food sciences has advanced so much in our industry that, to me, it seems like the most important quality when people are trying to buy stuff like a powder is actually taste, because protein, I mean, now everyone has whey protein.
Yeah. Well, and so we've morphed from, tastes like shit, work like hell, to, and I blame that on muscle milk. Okay. Because muscle milk, when muscle milk came out, it was so heavy fat. And man, when you got fat in a product, it's
Yeah.
cheesecake. It's cheesecake, right?
Yeah.
So you can make it taste whatever you want. And that bastardized the old work like shit, taste like shit, works like hell mentality, is that, dude, now it's just got to taste good. And that was the same thing. If you look at the Detour bar, now Detour bar comes out in a triple layer bar,
Yeah.
and it was the best bad option, right? But man, it was
It tastes like candy.
Oh my God, it was a Snicker bar. And on my way to school every morning, I would stop by the convenience store and get a Dr. Pepper and a Snicker bar. And now I could get a Diet Dr. Pepper and a Detour bar. But you're right, Doc. That's when the whole movement towards, it's got to taste great. It can't taste bad anymore. And bad relates to spoiled, or bad relates to something wrong with the product. I remember Rich Gasperi, I think it was his Saison product, the flavor tinted somehow. It killed the product. It absolutely killed that product, because once people got the bad taste, they weren't going back. They were not going back. And it took him forever to get people to get that product back, which man, I'm going to tell you, Richie had great products. Oh my God, he had some of the best bodybuilding products that I'd used, and I used a lot of his products.
What are the bigger brands now? And I guess, well, it's such a huge industry. Let's focus just on the bodybuilding niche. What would be considered the top 5 brands when it comes to bodybuilding supplements?
So here's what's odd. Drinks and bars take up the first 125 top brands. Drinks and bars.
Drinks and bars.
Drinks and bars. Drinks like Labrada's Lean Body. Chris Seabaum's Raw. His drinks are just exploding. You've even got Redcon One's. Their drinks are just exploding. Energy drinks still dominate the category. Protein took kind of a hit. COVID changed the whole landscape of distribution as we know it. The cost of shipping became extremely high, and Amazon ruined. And of course, our government closed down gyms for a year.
Yeah.
So, and when gyms opened back up, they were just trying to pay back rent. They didn't have money to invest in supplements. So they let supplement sales go. They did buy drinks and they did buy bars because they didn't have to stock up. They price per square inch in your cooler is cheaper than a big bottle of whey protein. Whey protein just went sky high. But what dominates the category in the top 125 products are drinks and bars. Top selling supplement, where it falls at 125, what do you think it is? I'll tell you, you don't think it's creatine.
Yeah, I was going to say it has to be creatine, right?
Creatine. Yeah. Yep, creatine. Creatine is the top of the supplement sales, and then you have whey. Well, actually, it's whey protein, and then right below it is creatine. But the difference is that whey protein is just used by so many more people. But they're neck and neck on how they run in sales. And whey protein, you said it a minute ago. Everybody has whey, right? So you stagger the sales between what you have in stock and what you don't have in stock. Creatine there's very few companies who really have creatine. When China had the issue with getting creatine in the United States, they blamed it on the Olympics. But during that time period, it was tough to get creatine. So you have a spike in whey protein, you had a spike in creatine, but creatine was harder to get than whey protein. But as sales go, whey protein is a staple, right? Because it's just a supplement that everybody should take. Creatine, though, is in my mind is the number one selling supplement after you get down to get through all of the drinks and all the bars. And when I say bars, I'm saying functional foods, chips, snacks. Scott James has got that Wicked Cuts with Branch. I love it because it's bacon, right? It looks like bacon. It may not be bacon, but it looks like bacon. But all of those things fall in now before the supplements, because I do think supplement sales have moved direct to consumer from the brands. They've moved through TikTok sales. I'm telling you, TikTok is dominating the industry sales right now. And you're seeing Amazon still dominates, and it's oddly Europa set Amazon up, and we were the first person that they ever purchased supplements from, and for 3 years, it was the only place they purchased their supplements were through Europa. And at that time, it really kept everything in check. All the pricing was okay. Retail GNC didn't have a problem with it because their pricing was high. And then when they decided to bypass and go direct to the manufacturers is when pricing just started to bottom out.
Okay. Let's do a quick, a sort of a slight detour. Stick to supplements and nutrition, but talk about your experience working with football players, because I know you and I have had many conversations about the hurdles, the challenges of dealing with student athletes. What was the biggest concern or misconception students and our coaches may have had regarding sports nutrition?
So 2013, the NCAA still hadn't allowed protein to be given to athletes. You give as much carbs as you want, but you weren't allowed to give an athlete protein. So I go to, and I'm in Charlotte. I drive down to speak to the head nutritionist, which was kind of trainer nutritionist at South Carolina. And it was a young kid. And I spoke to him and I said, look, man, what I think that I'm looking at with these football players, and I worked with rugby players. I was a rugby player, and I understood how it worked in the rugby world. And I understand now rugby wasn't in the gym as much as football players. And I'm going, look, this is when I'd had this whole concept of protein repairs muscle. And the way that football players are coached, they go into the gym, strength coach beats the life out of them. Then they send them on the field. Your coaches beat you to death for a couple more hours running plays, and then you go back, right? Well, you do this every day, 6 days a week. Your only day off is Sunday, and sometimes you're not even off Sunday. These are D1 elite athletes. And I'm thinking, okay, these are, in my mind, the same as a bodybuilder, even at the amateur level. They're in the gym 6 days a week. They're training muscle tissue. But the biggest difference that I noticed between football and bodybuilding or weightlifting, a lot more football players hurt than weightlifters were ever hurt. So I started going, look, man, if we can up their protein, and in my mind, again, it's way up their protein, we can get them repaired. The strength coach can do his job. He can prepare them for the football field. Football coaches can do their job. And tomorrow, because they're going to be completely recuperated because we're going to get enough protein, we're going to get the protein before they go to bed. We're going to give them D3 in the winter because they're not outside, and we're going to get their vitamins in, and we're going to get them in their nutrition balance. So when they go to the next day, do it all over again, just like a bodybuilder does in the gym. So I go 2013, go to South Carolina, talk to the trainer, nutritionist, and I said, look, man, if you could just introduce this to your strength coach. He goes, not doing it. I said, why? He goes, Eric, you will kill athletes. You give them too much protein, you will kill. He said, you will kill our athletes. I'm not going to do it.
Wow.
So I'm like, holy cow. So as I'm leaving, I meet up with this guy named Mike Sarignano, and he was a customer of Europa's from Connecticut, and he was hired as one of the strength coaches in South Carolina. Fast forward to 14, he gets hired as the head strength coach at Appalachian, and he calls me. He goes, hey, man, what you were telling our dietitian down there, can you come up and talk to me about it? So I go up and we sit down, and App didn't have a nutritionist. And I talked about, Mike, we've got to get these guys protein. When they come in the morning, you got to give them protein. And I said, Mike, also 2 big scoops of peanut butter, because they trained at 5:30, 6 o'clock. I said, they'll have nothing on their stomach, 2 big scoops of peanut butter. Look, they're not going to be able to utilize any of the protein until much later in the day, but it gives them a holding place in their stomach. It's not a liquid. It's not going to jostle around, beat them to death, but it will start their body in the recuperation. Immediately after they train, I want protein in their system, and not 1 scoop of protein. We're not doing 24 grams. We're doing 3 scoops of protein. We're doing 72 to 96. We're talking about 300-pound linemen, right? Yeah. We're not talking about 155-pound skill guys. We're talking about guys who are 290, 300, 320. So I call up my buddy Mike Pickett, and Mike Pickett had just sold Cytosport to I can't remember the name of the company. Anyway, sold it to them. He had 15 pallets of muscle milk sitting on his dock. I said, can I have them? He shipped them to Appalachian.
Wow.
15 pallets of muscle milk, 2014. And I told the coach, I said, look, coach, I said, the average weight loss in camp is 25 pounds in camp, the 3 weeks pre-season starting. I said, just let me bank on no weight loss. At the end of that first 3 weeks, we had a +5 weight gain. 7 weeks in, we had a 20-pound plus weight gain. And what we did is Mike went out, Mike and his strength and conditioning staff would go out at night to the local restaurants in Boone and ask them for food left over. They would bring it back, put it in the refrigerator. The minute they finished, they would have a shake ready for them, a 90+ gram protein shake. They would have food that was primarily protein. It was either chicken, fried chicken. We didn't care about the fried. And they had their little baggies of D3 and everything they had to take. Next 5 years, we have phenomenal seasons. They didn't have a winning season for 3 years prior to me coming. And not that it's me, but what we did is we changed their eating habits to the way that a bodybuilder would eat in order to grow muscle, get stronger. Because in the lineman, I mean, during the 80s, for some reason, we went to this plyometrics for linemen, jumping up and down and see how high a lineman can jump in the air, because they thought for some reason a lineman was going to run 35 yards. The lineman's running that far. I mean, he's stopping after 5 yards. It's all about the collision. So my thing was, no, let's make our linemen strong, really strong, because at the collision point is where you want them to be able to get them stronger. Well, you can't get stronger if you can't lift heavy weights, and you can't get stronger if you're injured. So let's avoid the injuries. And that's what we did. Right. And we I'm not saying I proved it, right? Because Mike Serignano was a great strength coach. He worked these guys right. All I did was prepare them in my mind and the way that we ate for tomorrow. And the tomorrows kept going on. And then when it came game time, I've been looking at, because a lot of the supplements, I think it was Anthony Amata had his the Carbolin, the slow burning carb, right? But I knew that at halftime with football teams, they come in and they load you down with Gatorade, right? And I'm like, okay, Gatorade, the salt and sugar, you get this buzz, and then by quarter four, you're dying. So I didn't come out with it, but I'd been researching platinose, isomaltulose, for 10 years on how it was a slow burning carb, but I didn't want to put it in liquid form because in my mind, right, this is all not studied. In my mind, if I put it in liquid, it would dissolve quick, and I wanted it to last a little bit longer into the fourth quarter. So we would do it in powder form, straight powder, put it in little Dixie cups, pour just enough water in little tiny Dixie cups to get it in, because I wanted it to stick in the esophagus and down. By the fourth quarter, in my theory, and I wish I would have ever tested it because I know I'm probably wrong, but as the other teams Gatorade was dropping, we were just doing this from the slow carb release. I don't know if it was just lucky. I just happened to be at App during those great years when every athlete we had was incredible. But it was what we did at halftime and what we did prior to the season starting and what we did during the season, because these kids don't eat. Right. Yep. If you send these kids, and you're talking about kids who just left mommy's home, right? They've just left home and they come and you send them to the cafeteria and you're supposed to know what to eat. And I'm like, no, somebody has to walk with them in the cafeteria. I was at Charlotte the 3 weeks, Charlotte 49ers, 3 weeks prior to me going to Louisville. And they hadn't invited me to Louisville yet. I didn't think I was going to go. So I was going to accept this position at Charlotte, but every day I was there for breakfast and lunch, and they had to come show me their plate, and I had to see the food. And what I learned then, and this was 5 years after App, because we didn't have a dietitian either, they were loading their plate down with carbs and very little protein. So I told them, I said, guys, you can only put protein on your plate first. Eat as much protein as you can get. And then when you're still hungry, eat more protein. And then when you're finished, then go get your carbs. Because what I was noticing with these players is that they would grab all the carbs first, they would load the carbs down, and they would leave protein on their plate because there wasn't room in their stomach for the protein, which was the most needed food on that plate that they had, but they weren't eating it, and nobody was watching. And that was consistent. That was consistent at App until they had to come in and get protein powder. They were sending them home. They were sending them to the cafeteria, and most kids after football practice don't want to eat. So, I mean, they don't want to eat. So most of them didn't have anything in the morning. They would train, go do practice, and by 12 o'clock would be the first time they would eat, and they still wouldn't eat. And then by 1 or 2, they would grab something out of their kitchen or from the cafeteria. But these athletes were not eating. And NCAA in the earlier said, no, I can't give them protein. Sorry. You got to give them baked potatoes. When we started implementing the protein is when I saw App, and App got accolades. We won almost every single game. Again, I think it was a combination of, like in the bodybuilding world, if you feed the body protein and let it recuperate, it will grow for you. And they weren't doing that at the college level then because they couldn't give them protein. I sneak in on the backside, and it was like the first year that they allowed us to get protein, and we just forced protein down. So that was at Sunbelt Appalachian. I go to Louisville, and my first day there, I meet one of the nutritionists, a young kid, just graduated from college, and And she goes, "Hey, coach, I just want you to know that my goal is to get rid of all supplements at Louisville." And I'm like, well, why? And I'm thinking to myself, well, why am I even here? I mean, I know the coach brought me up because I was part of the his program before, and I know they kind of helped drag me along up there. And I went, well, good luck getting a 320-pound lineman to eat 26 chicken breasts in a day. The next comment out of the mouth floored me, and this was 2019. That's the other problem. I don't believe in high protein.
Oh,
That's
And
recent. That's recent.
That's 2019.
Oh.
And this was from a recent graduate. I don't believe in high protein. And I'm like, now I go back to 2013 and I'm going, you're an ACC where the competition is a lot bigger. You're going to kill your athletes. I'm thinking, dude, I'm that guy in South Carolina going, you're going to kill your athletes. And, we fortunately in that 2019 year, Mike Sirignano had moved up with him, and he really did his best to be able to get these guys protein. It was enough for Louisville to, I think we won 7 games that year and then won our bowl game. And look, I will say, Scott Satterfield, who was at App and went to Louisville, one of the best coaches I've ever met. And when you have a great coach and a great strength coach combination, that just makes everything look good. But I ran into that resistance when I went back to South Carolina when one of my good friends became the head strength coach there. But now they had started to implement, like what I found in Louisville, they have dietitians. And look, man, I think these dietitians now, this is 2019. We're now in 2000 coming into 25. I do think the mindset, and a lot of it, look, I'm telling you, a lot of the mindset is what, and I'm going to say we, because I'm part of the ISSN as well, what we're doing to raise the awareness of, when I first got to MusclePharm, one of the things people said, man, what's the first thing you want to do? It's like, I want to bring back credibility to the brand. The brand had taken a hit in the last couple of years. I wanted to get back to testing, so you knew that what we said was on that label was in that label. And I do think that when you test products, and now you have dietitians deciding what's going to go into, strength coaches no longer decide what their athletes are going to take. It's the dietitian. But when I go in and see the layout of the meals on the table, carbs are still always first. And they load their plate down with the carbohydrates. And I'm like, I get that's what the books say. And look, I'm the least book educated guy that you'll ever meet. I mean, I was lucky to graduate high school. I'm damn lucky to graduate college. I'm just really lucky I got Dr. Antonio and you guys, because look, everything I did in the last 10 years, I'd call Doc and go, hey, look, how do you get the liver to secrete sugar to get through the blood-brain barrier in the brain? Because the brain is a muscle, right? And Doc's going, no, it's a tissue, but it acts like a muscle. I'm going, okay, if I can repair the muscle in the body during halftime, or if I can repair the brain like I do the body at halftime, and I can start that glucose into the brain, but how do I get it through the brain? What will carry through that barrier? And I'm going, Doc, how do I get it through the blood-brain barrier? But he's filling me with all this stuff, and I go back and say it to somebody like it was my idea, right? It's like, so it makes me look like this genius. And I mean, Doc will tell you, I've called him a lot of times before I implemented a ton of stuff at Appalachian, because I wanted to be sure that what I said had credibility behind it. And then when I was able to be certified by the ISSN, it gave me more credibility because I had the power of the backing. And look, I don't make anything up. I really do I don't want anybody to fact check me and go, well, where the hell did that come from? So everything that I've done in the last 15 years, especially when we did the Europa universities, I went through us because I wanted to make sure that I had a reputable program behind me that supported what I was doing, because now I'm dealing with college athletes. I'm dealing with elite athletes who I know that if they will implement this program, and look, I mean, Doc and I have talked 15 years, and I know I share very high levels of protein, but every pro bodybuilder, every amateur bodybuilder that I put on mega doses, and I put mega doses because I know if I say take 2.5 grams per pound, they're going to eat 1.5 grams per pound. If I say eat 1.5 grams per pound, they're going to eat 1 gram per pound. All I want them to try to do is reach that number. So if I set the number high enough, look, if you try to get 2.5 grams per 300-pound man, it's a lot of protein powder, a lot of gut issues, right? But I know they'll never do it no matter what, because nobody, even at that college level, has the time to do it, nor do they have the ability to do it. But if I can get them to shoot high, then they'll hit a number that I feel is adequate.
One of the things I think is critically important, which you don't really touch on, but really part of your involvement with some of these athletes, is you provided a buy-in. They looked at you, listened to you, and no matter what I always say, if there's no buy-in from the athletes, it doesn't matter what advice you give. So I think I applaud you for that. I think that's critically important. I mean, the science is great, but you got to have people communicating it. In the interest of time, let's wrap this up. Tony, I didn't know if you have any questions for Eric. Obviously he knows the history of this category.
No, he's great. And Eric, so just one of the things you said you were real good at, just quickly, is keeping the weight on them. And that was through camp and the season. Is that where the focus had to be? Because I know a lot of football players have complained how hard it is to maintain that weight during the season. Is that correct too? So that's a big challenge, or?
Oh yeah. So if you don't have to come from a deficit, you're already ahead, right? So we never had a deficit. Once I came on board, we always had a positive or plus weight gain through camp, where most linemen lose 20 to 25 pounds. They're already down. And then what they're trying to do is beef feed them, and not beef with meat, beef with carbohydrates. Yeah. And then they got fat players, right? We kept their weight up, and they had to eat. When they finished training, they had to eat, and they had to eat a lot. But that kept them, I mean, we didn't have injuries. We never had injuries. Right. So yeah, but once you start it, you can't back down, because then your stomach is used to that amount of food. Your body's needing that much food. And it just seemed to work. It's always worked with every bodybuilder I've ever worked with, any elite athlete I've ever worked with. It's unconventional, I know, but it just seemed. But you got to keep it going. You just can't go, hey, we made it through camp with a plus weight gain, now go eat whatever you want.
Right. Because holding it during the season is a challenge too, correct?
Oh yeah, and then they leave in December and they come back in January, and you go, what did you do for Christmas? Right. I mean, I lost 15 pounds. And you're like, you just start over again.
Well, Eric, hey, this has been great. I love the history of this stuff because the three of us lived through it. Appreciate you being on the Sports Science Dudes. Great guest, great information.
A lot of fun.
Yes. Yeah. So thank you very much. And we'll have this posted hopefully within 24 to 48 hours. And again, thank you so much, buddy.
Oh, good. Hey, always good to see you guys too.
Enjoyed it, Eric. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.